Welcome everyone to a Greenville County Library System virtual event. My name is Rachel and I'm the Adult Outreach and Event Coordinator for this library system. I'm so pleased to see all of you here this evening. We're going to learn a lot about winter gardening. So if you want to still get outside and enjoy your yard, this is the place to be. So we're so glad to see you here. If you haven't gotten a library card already, we encourage you to get your library card. It's easy. You can start off with an e-card online. That's at greenvillelibrary.org/get-a-card. You don't want to miss out on a library card. It's your key to all sorts of free resources and databases, not to mention books and all of our downloadable ebooks, audiobooks, you name it, we've got it. So you'll definitely want to check out all of the options that you have with a library card. If you're interested in gardening, which I'm assuming that you are since you're here this evening, you'll also want to check out our seed library page. That has information about our permanent seed library at the Berea branch of the library system. We've partnered with Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District to bring that to you. You can go to the Berea library anytime it's open and check out 10 packets of seeds with your library card. Best of all, you don't have to return them, you get to put them in the ground. So check out greenvillelibrary.org/seed library to learn more about that. We're so glad to have a presenter today who's with the Greater Greenville Master Gardeners Association. She's going to give us a talk about winter gardening. And if you don't mind, during her presentation, stay muted, keep your video off, and then at the end, we'll have an interactive Q&A session. You can unmute yourself and turn on your video then if you'd like. If you're thinking of questions while she's speaking, feel free to pop those in the chat and I'll let her know the questions when we get to Q&A. All right, if everyone is ready, let's give a warm welcome to Karen LaFleur. Thank you for joining us this evening.
You're most welcome. I'm delighted to be here, Rachel. Thank you. Call this bringing color and more to winter gardens, because I think it is winter gardens are something that we as gardeners don't ordinarily think of as part of our gardening year. Rachel has handouts, which she will be glad to share with you. They are electronic. It will be a PDF that comes to you that will give you a plant list of, I think, everything that I comment on, as well as some things that I don't. And then a few references at the end that have to do with local authors. And Rachel has already told you about questions. So for those of you that are here, imagine your garden. Right now it's brilliant with fall color. And that fall color is falling and soon will not be here. But think about that garden in a few months or a few weeks. And it will be a very different garden from what it is today. And that's the garden I want you to think about for possibilities for change. Think about the outlines, think about the contours, and think about what colors there are. It's not an oxymoron to talk about gardening in winter, even when there is snow on the ground, because that winter garden has all kinds of possibilities. So today I want to share with you some thoughts about the advantages of winter gardening and some of the many opportunities. So we're going to be looking at something that many people forget, and that is that the fourth gardening season has a tremendous amount of beauty in it. Think about the garden in winter as we, the gardener, are thinking about our chores. Think about the things about it that are different. In August, the air is hot and humid and close, but now it's becoming refreshing and clear. And the beauty of that is that there are very few of the allergens in the air that keep you sneezing and irritated. So those things aren't going to be there in a winter garden. Furthermore, the insect population is going to be in a different phase, one that won't bite you or sting you or bother you. And usually because of the soil, because of the rains of this time of year, is apt to be softer. In my opinion, time feels different in winter. And that is because we've lost the glory of summer or spring, and the colors are fewer, and therefore things are more open. Those of you that are artists know that a very important part of artistry is not only the visual that you see, the tree in the painting, but the open space that is created by that image of the tree. So that slower pace of things and those open spaces really extends your pleasure so that you can appreciate, so that you can contemplate what's going on better than you can with all of the distractions of summer. Winter is also a time when the outlines of your garden are revealed, when you can see what's there and you can appreciate things that are more subtle. I love this photograph because it's an actual color photograph, but boy, it looks black and white, doesn't it? But this is a winter photograph, obviously, of a hydrangea, but look at how the buds are there. Look at how they're starting to open even in the dead of winter. And if you go through your garden every day, that is something that you will see in winter. And in the summer, it's just hidden with everything that is going on. So the subtle becomes more obvious. This is a time for us to see really the shrubs and the trees better than the garden flowers. So we can focus on that, and that means we can also start looking to the future. We can think about what needs to be pruned. We can think about what we like, what we don't like, what needs to be changed, what's strong, what's weak. And so we're really planning the garden's future. And there's a tip on here, and that is you can do it now. It doesn't have to be in winter strictly, but take black and white photographs of your gardens. Because when you do that, it's easier to observe structure. So let's look at a rotogravure of some plants for winter interest. And I'm going to focus on color and on texture and on fragrance. And this is a garden, I think you probably all know, this is the garden in downtown Greenville that probably many of you have wandered through. And look at this winter vista. Look at how we've got these wonderful yellows of yucca. These are pansy beds, probably a grass here, and obviously the trees are gone. So these are things that are all growing in the Greenville area. Let's focus on the next slide on the idea of color. Winter colors. Winter colors are very different from July and August colors because they are the more subdued ranges of the color wheel. They're nowhere near as flashy as what you see in spring or in other seasons of the year. This is a photograph of shrubbery at Headley in Seneca, a wonderful nursery that I can recommend if you do not know. It is absolutely excellent. And that's not to criticize the Greenville nurseries. It just is one other nursery to add to your wish list destination. At any rate, these are some of the shrubs in Headley. And look at the colors there. You've got an orange, but it isn't a Clemson orange. You've got a blue, but it isn't a Carolina blue. You've got golds, you've got greens, you've got yellows, but they're at the more subdued, less intense range of the color spectrum. So yes, there is color, but it's nowhere near as dramatic as it is in other seasons. I love to say to audiences in the next slide, see how many colors you can find in this photograph. I can come up with about 10 because obviously we've got the red of the camellias, we've got the dark green of the camellia leaves. Look at the different greens in the cardoon. You've got at the tip the dark green, you've got intermediate green, you've got the tan yellow of the rib of the plant. You've got the gray of the watering can, you've got the brown of the stones, you've got the black in the background. And if you're really, really sharp-eyed, over on the far left, about a little over halfway up, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but right in here, there's a turquoise praying mantis made of metal, not real. So there's a lot of color in that picture, more than you would expect. This is what happens when the professionals do a garden. This is in North Carolina, Daniel Stowe, and look at the wealth of color in here. We've got hollies in the foreground, we've got tulips in the foreground, we've got some sort of grass, we've got a vine over on the left. I couldn't even begin to tell you what it is, but look at the vines on the arbor. One of them with very, very black branches. And on the far right, something still green. It's just a wealth of colors. And to me, at least, it's a beautiful garden vista. So that is possible. It is possible to have color in your gardens. Now let's look at a few things that we can actually put in our gardens. And I'll take you through on the basis of colors. And we will start with green. Green, ladies and gentlemen, is a color. And look at some of our green opportunities, because well, we're going to see green in winter. We've got the green of the Aucuba japonica. We've got the green of a tree shrub you may not know as well, an English cherry laurel. It kind of looks like a magnolia, but it is not a magnolia, as you can see from the scientific name. And if we advance, here is a different kind of green for your garden, one that is variegated in a different way, in a different leaf form. This is a fatsia, and fatsias will live outdoors year-round in Greenville with no problem. This particular one, as you can probably figure out from the picture, is at my front porch. So I can, I know it's there, and I never take it indoors. So it's going to survive the winter. I've never had any problem with it. Now, for those of you who want a green ground cover, you will see Arum italicum. This is a wonderful seasonal plant that is coming up now, and it will be green all through the winter. And look at the lovely texture that the leaves give you. Yes, the dark green of the leaf, but look at the wonderful yellow-green ribs in this plant. The only negative I would say to you about it is it's not the best behaved plant in the world. It will show up in other places in your garden if it likes your garden. So I have to work on mine to keep it under control. In the next slide, you will see autumn fern. And autumn fern is really a misnomer, because autumn fern really refers to the color of the fern as it emerges in the spring, not what color it is now or in the winter. And for a look at what the professionals do, this is the New York Botanical Garden. But look at all the different greens that are possibilities. So don't discard green as a color. Now, moving on into the reds, the coral bark Japanese maple. This maple is beautiful yellow right now, but in the winter, as it gets cold, the colder it gets, the better the red of the branches are. So this is a wonderful red addition to your landscape, and it is obviously not a flower. You saw the Prunus mume in the next slide. That was a baby when I took that picture, and now it's 18 feet tall. But this is a Prunus mume, a flowering apricot. And look at those wonderful red flowers that appear in January, deep winter. And what is nice about this plant is if you can reach them, you can even cut them, take them in, and force them. In the shrub family, there are other blooming red plants, and you can't talk about them without going to camellias, as you see in the next slide. Camellia japonica. And I love this slide because, next slide, notice the snow on the camellia. This is an old-timey camellia. I know Trish knows that mine is an old yard, over 100 years old. And these are some of the original plants. This particular one, I do know the name of it. It is Professor Sargent. Professor Sargent will start blooming sometime in early December, and it will bloom right through January, because sometimes a bud, there are enough buds along the way that something will be blooming there. And one of the neighboring shrubs, a different Camellia japonica in the next slide, is also in the snow. I do not know the name of this one, but it's a good illustration of how hardy Camellia japonicas really are. We think of them in Charleston and that climate, but these guys are Energizer bunnies that just keep on ticking. The next camellia is a peony form, and I think you can see why based on the shape of the flower. Absolutely beautifully shaped. One of my favorite of the red camellias, and it was an original. In the next slide, you see one of the camellias that's still blooming around Easter time. If you look real carefully in the middle, you'll see the pink azaleas that are out, and the daffodils and the jonquils have already bloomed, so you don't even see their bloom. So it was late spring. So there are lots of red camellia opportunities. Now, getting closer to the ground, we come to the Lenten roses. There are Lenten roses that are not fire truck red, but red. Burgundy red is what I'd call this, but it is a red Lenten rose. So you can have up in the trees, you can have down on the ground, or everywhere in the middle. Now let's change color and go to yellow. And start with a plant I would be very surprised if many of you know. It's new to me. Cornus mas, cornelian cherry. It's very hard to get a picture of this plant in the winter in my garden because there's so much plant material around, but you can tell from the trees this was wintertime. Look at the blobs of yellow. Very delicate, very airy, very graceful, small tree. The next yellow is probably one you do know something about, Mahonia. The Mahonia breeders have been working to improve the density and the color of the flowers. And so when this particular Mahonia, which is called Hope, is in bloom, it is truly stunning. And it is one of the cultivars which is not invasive. So if the birds drop the berries from this somewhere else, you're not going to have another Mahonia in your garden. The next plant is not a flower, rather it is a shrub, Florida anise. But look at the yellow and the green of it. It gives you a wonderful backdrop for some particular shrub or some other plant in your garden, maybe a conifer that is really dark green. In the summertime, if you have a burgundy flower, to take that burgundy flower and put it with the tips of the Florida anise, that's just a very powerful color combination. And to go to something much more subdued, this is yellow, but look at the size of the witch hazel flower, maybe the size of a 50-cent piece, more quarter-like. Very small, very delicate, but definitely yellow. Now, there's a lot certainly in the brown beige department, but let's look at a couple of things that you might not think of. First of all, the spent seed cases of our plants. These are allium spent allium flowers. That's hard to say. And here is a magnolia with buds waiting to open. And those of you in the next slide, those of you that are sharp-eyed may even be able to spot the praying mantis case that's just about in the middle center on that branch with two flowers and it's hanging down. Looks kind of like a wasp's nest. That is a praying mantis case. Protect that. That's a good guy. You don't want to hurt that. So brown and beige are opportunities. And this is Daniel Stowe in North Carolina. And look at the lovely vista that you have with very little vibrant color. Probably crepe myrtles along the row, a grass, I'm going to guess miscanthus. That is just, to me, a stunning landscape. And it really does not have a lot of vibrant color. Now, white is colorless, but as you know, in the next slides, white really draws the eye. And we have all kinds of white camellias to do just that. The one at the top is one of my favorite. I just love the flower shape. But then I love the single camellia at the bottom. And here again, I don't know cultivar names. Here is a different white that looks like, when you see it in bloom, this shrub kind of looks like you're looking through a snowstorm when it is fully out. These are Cynamelles or flowering quince. And what I love about this particular one is different. Most people plant red quince. And not that I have anything against red, but flowering quince is stunning in white, particularly in a winter garden. Now, to go lower to the ground, there are hellebores that have been bred to be white. And there are a couple that are very close, and I can't tell the difference. This particular one is called Jacob, and there's another one called Joseph, and I can't tell them the difference, but they're both white. There are also white flowers edged with pink in the hellebore family. And I put this picture in because these plants are in pots. So there's nothing to say that you can't put any of these plants in a pot. If it's tree, you better make sure it's a big pot to begin with. So let's move into the pink family and look at some pink planting opportunities. In the next slide, you'll see a relative of a red Prunus mume. This is a pink one called Peggy Clark. And look how lovely that is in the winter landscape. Really, this is a January photo. This is what that small tree looks like. And here's another image of it. If you advance, please, and notice the snow on the fence. This plant will put out a few flowers when it gets warm, and then it'll get cold and they'll drop off. And then it'll put a few more out the next time it gets warm, etc. So that for about 2 months in the winter, these Prunus mumes are going to give you wonderful color. Then there are the pink sasanquas. Now, sasanquas are the fall blooming camellias. And the one on the right is blooming right now in my garden. Well, actually, they both are. I take that back. They both are blooming. And depending on how the season goes, some of the late coming flowers will still be in bloom in January. Just really depends there on the weather. This is a japonica camellia. And I love this one because I love that peppermint form. Beautiful plant, blooms probably starting in late January, early February, and a wonderful pink addition. If you want pinks down at the ground, there are pink hellebores. As you see here, this particular one, it may be called violet, or this might be Penny's pink. I get them mixed up. At any rate, they're both perfectly lovely. And notice the hellebore breeders have been trying to breed to raise that flower up so that you can see it better, so that they're not all hanging their head down. Crocuses, late winter, are going to be up and give you a spot of purple color. Even in the summer, blue is rare. Blue is not a common color in the summer garden, but there is a rare blue that you can see in the winter garden that is 4 inches off the ground. Believe it or not, this is an iris. It's very small, very short iris that you're going to miss if you bury it in the deep part of your garden. You want this plant planted around the edges of a walk or somewhere where you're going to see it. You're going to pay attention to the garden, to the ground of the garden. Iris ungularis. Beautiful little burst of purple color at that time of year. So, to the cynics who say winter gardens don't have any color, I defy them to say, I think there's a whole lot of gardening color that is possible in winter. So, I hope I have convinced you that winter gardens do not have to be colorless. Some other features of the winter garden: winter textures. Those of you that have studied garden design know that color is just one feature of plant. Trees have barks that are interesting, and many plants have berries. So both of these can enrich the visions that you have in your garden by adding different textures. So let's first of all look at a couple of barks. These are 2 different crepe myrtles, and look how different their beautiful bark is. Crepe myrtle bark really shines in the winter. And in the next slide, you're going to see a totally different kind of bark. This is a big Japanese maple, not a dwarf one. And look at those lines on the trunk going vertically. And the whole tree is splattered with lichen that is growing on it. Wonderful winter interest of texture, color, and form. In the next slide, you will see 2 different mature trees. Obviously, these were not taken in the winter. We've got trees here that have a totally different look at the yellow on this trunk, and that will persist in the winter. In the next slide, we have a lace bark elm, also not taken in the summer. But look at the orangey, greeny texture of that wonderful bark. A total different look of bark is what you can see in this Japanese elm, where you've got the branches coming off. Just like many cherries, the Japanese elm has horizontal bark configurations, and that gives you, you can see the wall behind it, gives you a wonderful contrast and a parallel to what is there. And then in the next slide, I stole this image off the internet. So this is not an original photograph. I got it on the internet to show you how many different kinds of bark there are, and therefore how many different trees you can plant, because most of these are on trees. So bark is very definitely a texture that adds interest to the winter garden. And I can't leave trees themselves without commenting that the bare limbs are beautiful. The black limb against a blue sky is still, to me at least, a beautiful vision. Berries, the berries of winter. They're going to give us a little bit of pop of color and more texture. As you see in this winter picture, where a Savannah holly has red berries on it, wonderful for Christmas. My Savannah hollies right now are red berried. So they're going to be berried now well into and through the winter. Our birds aren't too crazy about these particular berries, and therefore the berries do tend to hang on longer than some of the other red berries, like some of the berries in the pyracantha that are beautiful, wonderful. And I love the fact that you've got that little black eye on the base of the berry. And you just can't beat a winter berry. These are really the stunning ilex in the ilex family. You know, the shininess of the berry and the bright red of its color. Wonderful for Christmas. But there are some berries that are a little bit more subtle, like this one. Maybe you have not seen your Fatsia bloom, but this is the post-bloom seed cases of a Fatsia japonica. Love that texture, just wonderful. And this particular Fatsia obviously is not variegated, so that pop of cream, I guess you'd call that, stands out much better than it does in a variegated plant. So berries are a treasure in the winter garden. But the sense that most people are surprised to even realize is part of winter is fragrance. Fragrance is what you just would not expect. Fragrance is in the winter garden, and here's a little bit of biology to go along with this. Fragrance is a way of a plant attracting a pollinator. And so in the wintertime, when there are no colors to attract a pollinator, you the plant, if you're the plant, you've got to put out a very fragrant flower. And that is what winter plants do, like these. This is a different, this is Peggy Clark. There's a cousin of Peggy Clark called Rosemary Clark. And these flowers, when they come out, they have kind of a spicy scent to them. And one of these trees can fragrance an entire garden. Here is rosemary against a blue sky. Now, I can't tell a whole lot of the difference between the colors or the scents, but they both give your garden scent, a wonderful winter scent, as does, next slide, witch hazel. Remember those little yellow flowers of the witch hazel you didn't think much of? This is one in full winter glory and fragrant. I cannot tell you how wonderful this plant smells. Some of you are perhaps familiar with Edgeworthia, paper plant, and the little umbels that in January will start to open and scent the entire area. It's not a big, massive flower, but it's a source of wonderful fragrance. As is the next plant, which is definitely not a glamorous plant, at least in my book, but it is a powerfully scented plant. I used to call, as a kid, I used to call this I was told it was sweet breath of spring. Honeysuckle. Yes, it is in the honeysuckle family. And you can see in the screen, there are a couple little honeysuckle-like flowers. But this plant is a potent potent scent maker, and the bees love it, absolutely love it. Another fragrant winter plant is one that I call the plant of gambling gardeners. Wonderful Daphne, beautiful little flower cluster at the tips. But shortly after I took this picture, literally a couple of days later, I went out to look at the plant again, and it was dead as a doornail. We don't know why this plant will do that. So I finally succeeded in getting one to stay alive by putting it in a pot, because we think there may be some organism which in some way builds up and kills the plant. We really don't know. But I treat it as I treat a bouquet of flowers. I throw whatever I paid for those flowers away when they die indoors. So if I have to replace my winter Daphne every few years, I'm going to do it because I love it too much to let it go. And then to come back to a plant I've showed you before, this is a potent little source of scent too. And if you have enough flowers, you can pick one and put it in a little bud vase and put it where you're going to walk by it in the house, in a hall, or where you're going to see it. The little Iris ungularis, beautiful plant. So going back to the pleasures of winter garden, there are many pleasures. There are the pleasures of form and structure and color and scent. And they are pleasures which provide a full range of color, not saturated color, but the range is there. And if you do it right, as you've seen, it can be done. It can give you a wonderful, colorful vista. To add to that, for those of us that are hardcore gardens, to me, it's the best time of year to do garden work, to do whatever I need to do in the garden, because it is not an August hot day. And on those days when something is in bloom, the air is delightfully fragrant and there are no pests. And that's yet another bonus. So the winter garden has a tremendous amount of pleasure for those who take the time and make the effort to get outside and enjoy it. Walk through it every day and you'll start to see the changes. You'll start to notice the very, very subtle beginnings of spring. So that's a look at some winter gardens. And I think you can think about your garden now from the standpoint of some things you might want to add to it, to give yourself some things to extend your gardening pleasure. But thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about something which I truly enjoy. And if I'm honest, I think winter is probably my favorite gardening season. Don't tell anybody that, okay? Rachel.
Wonderful. I love to hear it. You can't beat the cooler temperatures for sure. Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate your time. And we are so thankful to Karen and the Greater Greenville Master Gardeners Association for sharing their time and resources with us to extend our knowledge about gardening, and particularly gardening in this area. As I said before, we want you to please come into the library, get a library card. You can use our resources and databases to look at more in-depth information about gardening. You can check out some great books on gardening. If you're watching the recording, the links to check out those books are in the video description. Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and you can sign up for the e-newsletter from our homepage. That's greenvillelibrary.org. You can do that so you stay in the know about all of our gardening programs and other related programs you might be interested in. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I hope you'll come back again soon. If you're watching the recording, enjoy viewing the rest of the videos on this gardening and sustainability playlist. Thank you so much, and I hope
Thank you,
all.
Rachel.
Yes, thank you, Karen. And I hope all of you have a wonderful evening.